Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're looking at something you might not expect: building your own Garmin watch faces.
Oh, wow.
I know what you're thinking.
Sounds complicated.
Coding for a watch. But trust me, the sources you've shared make it seem surprisingly straightforward.
Mm.
It's actually pretty inspiring to see how much creative control you can have over something we use every single day.
Yeah, it really is fascinating. The source material really highlights this idea of taking something off the shelf and making it uniquely yours. And it's not just about aesthetics.
Right.
It's about functionality, too.
Okay, let's
Yep.
unpack this. Our main source is a developer who actually walked through building their own watch face.
Uh-huh.
They even called it Kago,
Mm.
which is a combination of their children's names. Talk about a personal touch.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Yeah, it really shows how much passion people have for this kind of project. And Kago is packed with cool features, too. It's got a large, easy-to-read time display, which makes sense if you're using it for something like running. Plus, you've got all your key stats right there.
Yeah.
Heart rate, steps, notifications, even daily stoic quotes.
It's like a perfect blend of practicality and personality.
Mm-hmm.
But what really struck me is how approachable the whole development process seems. They talk about using the Garmin Connect IQ SDK.
Mm.
Is that like a special set of tools just for Garmin devices?
Exactly. Think of it like a toolbox designed specifically for building apps and watch faces for Garmin. And to make things even easier, there's a Monkey C extension for VS Code,
Hmm?
which is a popular platform for coding. It's all about streamlining the process and making it accessible to more people.
But even if I'm not a coding whiz, I can still potentially create my own watch face.
That's the beauty of it.
Wow.
The sources emphasize how user-friendly these tools are.
Okay.
They even mention a simulator where you can test out your watch face virtually, which takes away a lot of the pressure of working directly on the device.
That's a great point. You can experiment and play around without worrying about messing anything up on your actual watch.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond the SDK itself, are there any other tools that are essential for this process?
The developer mentions a few others that are really helpful.
Okay.
For instance, if you want to use custom fonts, you'll need a TTF to FNT converter,
Okay.
which essentially translates your chosen font into something the watch can understand.
Mm.
And if you're in a region where you can't directly install watch faces from the Garmin Connect IQ store,
Right.
they recommend OpenMTP for manual installation.
So you've got your toolkit with the SDK and extensions these extra tools for fonts and transfers and a simulator to test everything out safely. It sounds surprisingly well-equipped for a project that seems, on the surface, pretty niche.
It is. And the process itself is broken down into clear steps.
Okay.
You start with a generator that sets up the basic structure.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can bring in custom fonts, images, and your own color palette.
Right.
Then you get into the coding part where you fetch the time and date pull data from the watch's sensors. Uh-huh.
And use code to draw those dynamic elements that bring your watch face to life.
Okay, so we've talked about the tools and the overall process, but I'm curious about the specifics. Let's take custom fonts, for example. How do you actually incorporate them into your watch face design?
So it's actually pretty straightforward. Let's say you find a cool font online
Mm-hmm.
that you want to use. You would first use that TTF to FNT converter we talked about
Right.
to create two files, a .fnt file,
Okay.
which is like a blueprint of the font, and a .pm file, which is an image of all the characters.
Gotcha.
These two files work together to display the custom font on your watch face.
So it's kind of like translating the font into a language the watch can understand. What happens next? Where do those files go?
You put them in your project folder,
Okay.
usually under a section specifically for fonts.
Uh-huh.
The key is to make sure that the .fnt file is pointing to the right .pne file,
Okay.
so the watch can find the visual representation of each character.
Okay, so the files are in place. How does a watch face actually know to use them? That's where a bit of code comes in. You essentially give the font a unique ID
Uh-huh.
in an XML file, which is like a configuration file
Right.
for your project. This ID is what you'll use to reference the font later on in your main code.
It's like giving the font a name tag,
Yeah.
so you can easily call it up when you need it. What about images and colors? Is it a similar process?
It is. Images are handled in much the same way. You add your image files to the project and then define them as resources in an XML file dedicated to images. For colors, you usually define them in a separate XML file where you can create custom color names
Okay.
and assign specific color values to them.
So it's all about organization and giving things clear labels so you can easily access them later. But I imagine the real magic happens in the code itself.
Right.
That's where you bring the watch face to life with dynamic elements and functionality.
You're exactly right. The code is where you pull everything together. The fonts, the images, the colors, the data from the watch's sensors. The sources even provide some helpful code snippets to get you started.
All right, let's dive into those snippets. I'm particularly interested in how they handled those dynamic elements. You mentioned that the Kaigo watch face includes things like heart rate and a daytime progress bar. How did they code that?
Well, for the heart rate, they tapped into the activity monitor class, which is basically a hub for all sorts of sensor data.
Okay.
You can access heart rate, step count, calories burned, even battery level. It's all there.
Wow.
They provide a code snippet showing exactly how to pull the current heart rate and display it on the watch face.
That's amazing. So with a few lines of code, you can display all sorts of real-time data. What about that progress bar? How do they create that visual element?
For that, they use the graphic context drawing methods.
Okay.
Imagine it like having a set of digital drawing tools. You can use code to draw shapes, lines, and arcs directly on the watch face screen.
Yeah.
For the progress bar, they drew a circle and then used the draw arc method to create an arc that gradually filled the circle as the day went on.
So it's like they're painting on the screen using code.
Yeah.
That's a really cool way to visualize the passage of time.
Exactly. It adds a dynamic element that's both informative and visually appealing.
Right.
And it shows how you can blend creativity and technical skill to design something unique and personal.
I'm starting to see how building a watch face can be almost like a form of self-expression. You're not just choosing a design. You're actively creating something that reflects your own style and preferences.
That's a great point. And what's even more exciting is that the developer behind Kaigo made their code open source.
Oh, wow.
Meaning anyone can access it, learn from it, and even modify it to create their own variations.
Wait, seriously? They shared their entire project with the world. That's incredibly generous.
It really is, and it speaks to the collaborative spirit of the developer community. They're not just building things for themselves, they're sharing their knowledge and empowering others to do the same.
This whole deep dive has been so eye-opening. I came in thinking this was way beyond my capabilities, but now I'm actually feeling inspired to give it a try. It seems like with the right tools and a bit of guidance, anyone can create something amazing.
Absolutely. And you know what? That's a perfect segue to our final thoughts.
Yeah.
We've talked about how accessible this process is, but what about the bigger picture? What does it mean for you, the listener?
So we've seen how user-friendly the tools are and how even someone with limited coding experience can create a custom watch face. But what's the takeaway here? Why should anyone even bother?
I think it boils down to this idea of personal empowerment, in a world where so much of our technology feels prepackaged and out of our control. This is a chance to really personalize something we use every day.
You're not just choosing from a set of pre-designed options. You're creating something that perfectly aligns with your needs and your aesthetic.
Exactly. And that sense of ownership, that feeling of, I made this, can be incredibly rewarding. It's like taking back a little bit of control in a world that often feels very controlled.
We've talked about the practical benefits, getting the information you need at a glance, customizing the look and feel of your watch. But there's also this creative aspect that I find really appealing.
Absolutely. It's a chance to flex those creative muscles, even if you don't consider yourself a designer. You can play with fonts, colors, layouts, and even animations. It's almost like a mini art project right there on your wrist.
And remember, the developer from our source material made their project open source. That means anyone can take their code, tweak it, add their own features, and create something entirely new. It's a fantastic example of collaboration and knowledge sharing.
It really democratizes the whole process. You don't have to start from scratch. You can learn from others, build upon their work, and contribute your own ideas to the community.
So if you've ever looked at your Garmin watch and thought, I wish I could change this, or I'd love to have this information displayed right here, now you know you absolutely can.
Don't let the idea of coding intimidate you. The tools and resources are out there, and with a little patience and curiosity, you can create something truly unique and personal.
And who knows, maybe you'll be the next developer inspiring others with your own amazing watch face creation. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep creating, and keep diving deep.